Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Jabihare Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare. Gopi Jana Balava Giribaradhare. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachare. Yamunatira Vanachare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Bihare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihare. Kunja Bihare. Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jai Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada. Jai Jai Prabhupada 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 Prabhupada. Prabhupada Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stadhistasisavad. His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON's founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Ki. Shri Giri Govardhan Ki. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki. Sankirtan Yagya Ki. Go Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Bhagavate Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 4. Sati quits her body. Text 11. Am I right? Text 11. Let us hope. You got text 11 there? Got it? Devyuvacha na yasya loke sti atishayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasmin samastatmane mukta vairake rite bhavantam katama pratipayet devyuvacha nayasya lokes jatishayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasman samastatmani mukta vairake rite bhavantam katama pratipayet devyuvacha nayasya lokes jatishayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake rite bhavantam katama pratipayet devyuvacha nayasya lokes jatishayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake rite bhavantam katama pratipayet Vairake te karanta katama pratipayet devyuvacha okay stati shayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake Vite bhavantam katama pratipayet. Devyuvacha. Yasya lokes jatishayana priyas. Tata priyo deha britam priyatmanaha. Tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake. Vite bhavantam katama pratipayet. Ladies, Devyuvacha Yasya lokes atishayana priyas Tata priyo deha pritam priyatmana Tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake Vite bhavantam katama pratipayet. Devyuvacha. The blessed goddess said, Na, not, yasya, of whom, loke, in the material world, asti, is, atishayana, having no rival, priya, dear, tata, so, apriya, enemy, dehabritam, bearing material bodies, priya atmana, who is the most beloved, tasmin, towards Lord Shiva, samasta atmane, the universal being, mukta vairake, who is free from all enmity, rite, except, bhavantam, for you, katama, who, pratipayet, would be envious. Translation: the blessed goddess said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved of all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. No one but you could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In Bhagavad Gita chapter 9 verse 29, the Lord says, Samoham sarvabhuteshu, I am equal to all living entities. Similarly, Lord Shiva is a qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he has almost the same qualities as the Supreme Lord. Therefore, he is equal to everyone. No one is his enemy and no one is his friend. But one who is envious by nature can become the enemy of Lord Shiva. Therefore, Sati accused her father, no one but you could be envious of Lord Shiva or be his enemy. Other sages and learned Brahmins were present, but they were not envious of Lord Shiva, although they were all dependent on Daksha. Therefore, no one but Daksha could be envious of Lord Shiva. That was the accusation of Sati. Devyuvacha nayasya lokes jati shayana priyas tata priyo deha britam priyatmana tasmin samastatmani mukta vairake Rite bhavantam katama pratipayet. The Blessed Goddess said, Lord Shiva is the most beloved of all living entities. He has no rival. No one is very dear to him, and no one is his enemy. No one but you could be envious of such a universal being who is free from all enmity. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastya Chadeshatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha Paditanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, finally at least there in the place of Daksha, Mother Sati speaks up and expresses her heartfelt feelings very strongly that, well, first of all, how special Lord Shiva is. He is as Prabhupada puts it, qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he has almost the same qualities as the Supreme Lord. Well, you could say he has many of the qualities of the Supreme Lord, although not all of the qualities. There are 64 main qualities there listed out. In the 21st chapter of Nectar of Devotion, we will not read through them all, but first of all, there is a list of 50 which the Supreme Personality of Godhead, of course, has all of them, every single one, in full, just absolutely in full. And those 50, though, we as parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, we can possess all of these, all 50, in minute quantities, just very, very little. Let me just mention a few while we're at it. First one, which is mentioned, listed in the list, is beautiful features of the entire body. Everybody has some beauty. Every living entity has some beauty, at least in terms of some other living entity who will become attracted, appreciate that living entity as being beautiful. You know, the male and female elephants and rhinoceroses and other animals which look not very attractive in terms of real beauty to human beings, but amongst each other, within the same species, there's an idea that this one is very beautiful by our standards. So like this, as Srila Prabhupada mentions here, these first 50, the jivas can possess, all of them even, but just in minute quantities. And the second one mentioned is marked with all auspicious characteristics. And this is also possible amongst the humans and amongst other species. Some auspiciousness may be there to some degree. Number 3 is extremely pleasing. That's also there. People can be somewhat pleasing. They can be somewhat pleasing. So like this, in this 21st chapter of Nectar of Devotion, these different quality, 50, the first 50 of the 64 qualities of Lord Krishna are listed out, and it is possible for individual living entities to possess all of these qualities in minute quantities. But particularly if we talk about all of them, then, and Prabhupada makes the point, provided they become pure devotees of the Lord. So then, in the same chapter, Srila Prabhupada goes on to list another 5 which can be possessed, partially manifest in the persons of Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva. They can possess the first 50 partially, but also this second grouping of another 5. And the way Prabhupada puts it is, there's sometimes partially manifested in the persons of Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva. And these are changeless, all cognizant, ever fresh, Sat Chit Ananda, and possessing all mystic perfections, just like Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva. They live so long by our standards that, at least by our standards, they're kind of changeless. In our lifetimes of however 70, 80, 90 years, or 70 or 80 maybe, usually, then our bodies change so much from childhood to youth, maturity, and then middle age, and then finally old age. But during that time, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, you cannot notice any change. You won't notice any change. So in a certain sense, there can be some idea of changelessness in the cases of these, by our standards, very extraordinary personalities, all cognizant. Lord Brahma particularly basically knows the whole universe, the whole creation, the whole universe at least. He knows. So, Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Caitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Yes, so in a certain sense, a type of all cognizance, sarvagya, being able to know everything in a certain sense can be there. And similarly with the other qualities, ever fresh, Satchitananda, and possessing all mystic perfections. So that's 55. 55 can be possessed by Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva, who of course is the person being discussed here. Then Lord Narayan possesses another 5. And while we're at it, let's just read through them. He has inconceivable potency, uncountable universes generate from his body. That doesn't apply to Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva, only to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the original source of all incarnations. This also doesn't apply to Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva. He is the giver of salvation to the enemies whom he kills. Well, according to Brihad Bhagavatamrita, Lord Shiva can at least give salvation, impersonal liberation to some degree, to some people. That is possible, but not in all cases. Whereas the Supreme Lord can give salvation in all cases to whoever he likes. And then he is the attractor of liberated souls. So of course, these 5 qualities are manifest in Lord Krishna himself completely. But they're also manifest in Lord Narayan, who's in a sort of secondary position in relation to Lord Krishna. And then, of course, there are 4 special qualities which even Lord Narayan, what to speak of Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, what to speak of the regular living entities like ourselves, but even what to speak of Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, what to speak even of Lord Narayan, they don't have. Those 4 are only possessed by Krishna himself. Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna is in a unique position. And first of all, he's the performer of wonderful varieties of pastimes, especially his childhood pastimes, which are just much more wonderful than even the pastimes of Lord Narayan or other Vishnu forms of the Lord. He's surrounded by devotees endowed with wonderful love of God, more love of God than is possessed by any other devotees of other forms of the Supreme Lord. Then he can attract all living entities all over the universes by playing on his flute. Of course, there are many flute players. The flute is a popular instrument. But no one can play like Krishna, who just overwhelms, overpowers even animals and even plants and trees by the sound of his flute. And then finally, he has a wonderful excellence of beauty which cannot be rivaled anywhere in the creation. So anyway, like this is interesting how these different qualities are possessed by different beings, but but no one possesses them like Krishna does, and some of them, well, there are these different gradations of living beings. So Sati is aware. She's aware that Lord Shiva is a qualitative incarnation of the Supreme Lord. And so she knows he has almost the same qualities, almost the same number, and to almost, or not the same degree, but quite some degree, very substantial degree, and therefore he is so special, therefore he's more special than any of us, and therefore he's more special than Daksha himself. Daksha himself, who of course feels he is very special and has taken exception to Lord Shiva not rising when he came into the place. Lord Shiva didn't get up to offer him respect. And Sati knows that actually Lord Shiva is far more respectable. He is worthy of far more respect than even Daksha. Even though they're brothers, they're both sons of Lord Brahma. So particularly Sati here in this verse is pointing out two special features of Lord Shiva and contrasting them with features of Daksha's character. Lord Shiva is the most beloved, Priyatmana. He's Priyatmana. He is the most beloved of all living beings as a form of the Supreme Lord. He's lovable. He's lovable because of his qualities. Because he's such an amazing and wonderful person. He's lovable. He can be appreciated and glorified, but actually he is lovable because of the type of person he is. As we know that Lord Shiva, even with people who are extremely degraded, the ghosts and hobgoblins and pishachas and tikaloshes and these other degraded living entities who are subhuman. They're very much subhuman, even though they may look somewhat human. It depends which grouping they're in, but many of them, they look quite human or fairly human. But actually by nature they're subhuman. They're subhuman in their qualities. Very grotesque looking, but not just looking unpleasant, but actually their characters are very unpleasant. More unpleasant than human beings normally are. Of course, in the human species, we do get our human beings who are really just extremely horrible, offensive, extremely offensive, or worse than offensive, and just really abominable. And we can understand such people, people who do very horrible things to other people and just extremely envious and abusive towards other people. Generally, we can understand that they are trainee goblins, hobgoblins, and these types of subhuman types of living entities who may have some resemblance to human beings, but in terms of character, they're not up to a real human standard. So, yes. So, Lord Shiva, he is the most beloved and most worthy of appreciation, of being appreciated, most worthy of affection, because he is so kind that he's even kind to those subhumans. And just, normally they just wouldn't be associated with at all because of their low nature. But he's very kind to them. Therefore, one of the many names of Lord Shiva is Patita Pavan. Of course, it's also generally the term is used for Lord Caitanya. But it's also there for Lord Shiva in this type of context. So therefore, it can be said, he's the most beloved of all living entities. And then, because of his nature as a partial manifestation of the Supreme Lord, or qualitative manifestation of the Supreme Lord, another quality of the Supreme Lord, which he has to a very significant extent, not as much as the Supreme Lord, but still he has it to a very substantial degree, is that he's equal to everyone. No one is his enemy, no one is his friend. He's equal to everyone because he is self-situated. He's self-situated, so he has nothing to gain from anyone, and he has nothing to lose by anyone. He's there in his own position, established. So, of course, that's a very interesting quality. Maharaj Yudhisthira was known as Ajata Shatru. Ajata means unborn or never born, and Shatru means enemy. Maharaj Yudhisthira was like that. But of course we know he had many enemies, many people who considered him their enemy and tried to kill him ultimately. But he was Ajata Shatru because he didn't consider them his enemies. And he was equipoised, and he was nicely disposed even to those people who did their very best to kill him and cheat him, and just they treated him in terrible ways. So yes, Maharaj Yudhisthira was like that. And this, of course, this is a characteristic of great devotees. Haridas Thakur, he was like that. He was being caned in how many 22 marketplaces or so. And of course he was protected by the Lord, so it didn't hurt him, even though just an ordinary person would have died. But he survived, and he was fine physically. But the people who had been caning him and trying to kill him, at the end, when they saw that he's fine, there's no adverse effects on him from our caning. When they saw that, they told him that because we've been unable to kill you, we will be killed. And Haridas Thakur, he was so compassionate, extremely compassionate, that he felt that, oh, you're going to be killed for my sake? No, no, no. We can't have that. And he just voluntarily, of his own accord, gave up his body right on the spot. So, whereas the ordinary living entities can have up to 50 of these 64 qualities of the Supreme Lord to a minute degree, but for a great devotee like Haridas Thakur or Lord Shiva, he is a great devotee, they can possess the different qualities to a much greater degree than the ordinary conditioned souls. So, and Lord Shiva, because he's a partial manifestation of Lord Krishna himself, he is able to manifest different of those qualities to very amazing and wonderful degrees. And therefore he's such an outstanding person, such a glorious person. And Sati says, who could be envious of someone like that? Well, who could be envious? Only you could be envious of a person like that. Otherwise, any other person who's just a little free from envy and a little intelligent, a little able to appreciate others, is going to be very impressed by Lord Shiva and will definitely not be envious. So this envy, of course, in this pastime, one of the many different qualities of people which is being pointed out is envy in the case of Daksha. This Daksha possesses envy to such a degree that he could be envious even of someone like Lord Shiva. It's practically unimaginable. How could someone be envious of someone like Lord Shiva? It's barely possible. So therefore, Sati is saying that how can you be envious of him? Because he is Priyatmana, which means beloved, the most beloved, but it also means he's the dear friend, Priyatmana, the dear friend of all living beings. And he's so great that he's Samastatmani. He's the cause of the whole universe. And the soul of the whole universe, he is Rite, Rite means the form of truth. He has no enemies. Mukta vairake. So who on earth, who could possibly be envious of someone like that? It would only be a person who has just sort of like the maximum degree of envy. Someone who is truly outstanding amongst other people because of the amount of envy they have. This is not very nice. Just like in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, there's Ramachandra Puri. It's a famous story. We won't go through all the details, but he would always try to find faults, and he would look around, and he felt he was helping the devotees, but actually it wasn't really a matter of helping. It was just that he was so much into criticizing. And so he would say to different devotees, he would point out, anyway, we won't do it, but he would point out certain things which may have been true. I mean, there may have been some truth, but definitely not always. Why are you sleeping in the class? But he would just, sure. And it was extremely distasteful, actually. And in fact, it was so distasteful, and the devotees didn't appreciate him so much that when he left Jagannath Puri to move on to some other place to find some other devotees to point out the faults in, but when he left Puri, they had a festival. There was a celebration. And if you're that sort of devotee, that when you leave a place, if you move on to some other place to render service, and the devotees have a festival, not to appreciate you, but actually because they're just so glad to get rid of you, you don't want to be that sort of devotee, do you? That, he's gone, how wonderful. Hope he doesn't come back. But Daksha was that sort of person. Ramachandra Puri was that sort of person. They were so happy to be rid of him. He was like a great burden because of his enviousness, his criticalness. So Daksha's like that. And of course we read not long ago, just a week or something like that ago, how there were other Brahmins, there were demigods there. There were other demigods, and these are very great personalities in terms of life in the material world. And they ignored Sati. Her mother and her sisters greeted her and received her in a nice way as would have been expected. But those others, and they all knew her, and they knew who she was and what an important person she was, but they all ignored her because they understood that if we greet her and express some appreciation for her and happiness to get her association, and if Daksha finds out that we've done this, then he's going to become angry with us, and he's going to reject us, and we don't want to be rejected by him, because, in fact, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, those assembled there were filling their bellies with the food offered by Daksha, and they didn't want to miss out on their food from Daksha, and therefore they ignored Sati, even though normally they'd greet her and she would get very nice treatment, but they just ignored her. Not exactly because they were really envious of her and they just really wanted the worst for her, and they just really objected to her themselves. Prabhupada says, other sages and learned Brahmins were present, but they were not envious of Lord Shiva and also not envious of Sati, although they were all dependent on Daksha. Therefore, they had to toe a certain line. So really, the envy was coming from Daksha. And Daksha was such a contaminated person that he was even able to be envious of Lord Shiva, which otherwise it wouldn't be possible. Lord Shiva's just too great and just too wonderful a person. Just such a wonderful person. No one could be envious of someone like that unless there's something really wrong with them. Hare Krishna. Any comments or questions? Oh, yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If we find people or devotees who have like sort of minute tendencies like Daksha to kind of look for the faults, how do we avoid becoming inimical towards them or harboring ill feelings towards them?
People who are sort of envious.
Yeah, or sort of like, Ramachandra.
Yeah. How do you avoid becoming envious of them? Well, yeah, we don't want to become envious of them, but we would have to recognize, if it's really prominent, like in the case of Ramachandra Puri, it was really prominent. So, and it even came out in relation to Lord Caitanya himself. So, but it's interesting, Lord Caitanya, the way he reacted was he accepted that the criticisms as if they were, he didn't get angry with Ramachandra Puri, but rather he sort of followed the criticisms, you could say. Ramachandra Puri criticized Lord Caitanya for eating too much and eating inappropriate things, particularly sweets. But Lord Caitanya, he then cut down his eating. So it's a very nice example of, you could possibly say trying to take gold from a dirty place, or at least not reacting negatively towards someone who's negative towards you. But otherwise, in general, to not become envious not to become too critical of a critically minded person. We should, if someone's like that, and we can see it, then at least within our regular association, we should try to help the person. And trying to help a person who has a fault, like a real fault, that's mercy. That's kindness towards that person. So that's one thing. If you find a person who's sort of got some envy or something like that, we should try and help them to get out of it. That's a very nice thing to do. But if somehow we can't, or we're not able to, then probably we should avoid the person, not in a mood of envy, but just in the sense that we don't want to be exposed to that ourselves. And we can understand that this person, somehow or other, because of their previous activities and the way they've lived, they've developed this type of nature. And we should pray to not become like that ourselves. But actually we should really try and help someone like Ramachandra Puri. He was so far gone that no one felt they could help him. There were some others like Paramananda Puri. Paramananda Puri was his godbrother. They were both disciples of Madhavendra Puri. And even Paramananda Puri didn't try to correct Ramachandra Puri, but what he did, he advised Lord Caitanya to not take him seriously, to not take Ramachandra Puri seriously. And it's very interesting, actually, Paramananda Puri said to Lord Caitanya that there are, in this regard, there are two rules. One is, don't criticize anyone. And the second is, don't glorify anyone. These are two rules. And he says, these rules should be followed. But the second rule of not glorifying anyone, you can break that. You can break that rule. The rule's there. Don't criticize, don't glorify. Just remain equipoised. But you can break the rule that you shouldn't glorify. But you just can't break the rule of that you shouldn't criticize. So these are some thoughts on that. Yes.
Maharaj, what if we have accepted criticism in the past and changed our ways and discovered that it's been detrimental to us?
Uh-huh. Yes. Well, then you should readjust. Get some good advice and readjust. But, one should be careful. Of course, we have to try and become intelligent enough to understand if something is really is not good advice. That we should, just by development in Krishna consciousness, but to become, like having, one has been through some experience like that, to become opposed to accepting advice is not good. Sometimes it happens like that. Someone's been through a bad experience for whatever reason. But then let's say particularly in this regard, but then having been through some bad experience, then they become cynical towards advice and devotees, people who are trying to give advice. That's not good. Yeah, therefore, we should be careful about whose advice we accept. Yeah, it's not just, like there are 3 levels of devotees in relation to us. There's those who are senior, those who are more or less equal, and those who are junior. So we should not accept advice. Generally, we should not accept advice from those who are junior. And, if someone who's junior somehow tries to give some advice, but, you're doubtful, then you should take it up with someone senior who is actually qualified to give advice. Yeah. But we generally, as a general principle, we take advice from seniors, but we don't take advice from juniors. And, if you're given some advice and it was really wrong, it sounds like whoever gave the advice, you chose the wrong person to take advice from. And it's important that we choose the right people to take advice from.
Raj, a neophyte devotee can't distinguish who is senior and who is junior. So what do we do?
Well, you should learn how to recognize. And, in simple terms, those who have been devotees longer than you are senior. Those who have been devotees more or less the same length of time are equal. And those who have been devotees for definitely shorter periods of time are junior. But in terms of accepting advice, we should find certain people to take advice from. Not just because whoever happens to be senior, we just automatically take advice from them. But we should be careful to take advice from the spiritual master, first of all, and then a small number of others who are qualified and reliable for that. Otherwise, sometimes you get conflicting advices, and then you, who's the one who needs the advice, you end up deciding what advice you're going to accept. But by definition, you're not really the right person to decide what advice you should accept.